Today, we're diving deep into a topic that hits close to home for many of us: why video games just don't seem as fun anymore. Now, I know you might be quick to blame the video game industry and the changes that have occurred over the years, but I'm here to tell you that there's a much more fundamental reason behind this shift in attitude a lot of people have been having towards video games. Don't get me wrong, the video game industry has changed. Microtransactions and game design have evolved, sometimes for the better, most times for the worse. And most who feel kind of jaded towards video games these days are very quick to identify those specific changes, whether we're talking about the rise of the live service, whether we're talking about games these days just feeling less polished and unfinished. But what if I told you that these industry changes are just the tip of the iceberg? What if I told you that there's something even more significant at play here? You'll notice that the vast majority of people who complain about quote-unquote modern gaming are older people. People who are in their mid-20s, 30s, and beyond. There's a lot more people in those age groups complaining about video games supposedly not being fun anymore than there are, let's say, 15, 16, 17-year-olds complaining about video games not being fun anymore. And I don't think that's a coincidence. Let's think about it for a second. If you're 14 or 15 years old, you have lived long enough to witness a lot of change in the video game industry and just life as a whole. Like, even though you're still young and you're developing and you haven't really experienced the world yet, you still have witnessed a lot in your life. I remember when I was 15, looking back at how great video games were when I was 7, but I didn't get hung up on the fact that it was so much different back then and it's so different now, and I don't like modern gaming now, and I quit modern gaming. Like, no, I was so invested in video games when I was a teenager more than any other point in my life, because I was at the stage of my life where I was old enough to start to appreciate art and storytelling a lot more than I did when I was like 7, but also at the age where I had not yet had a whole lot of responsibility. I remember constantly going on 12-hour play sessions, something that I will probably never do again in my life. It just felt like I had all the time in the world to play as many video games as I wanted, however long that I wanted, and as much as I loved video games when I was a child as well, I wasn't a little pea-brain that couldn't get past the 3rd level of every game that I played. It's so bad. Like, if you guys watch my Let's Play channel, I go back and play a lot of the games that I played from my childhood, and I'm just, like, replaying these games. Most of the game that I'm playing, like, I've never experienced before, because I was just so bad when I was younger. It was terrible. I didn't realize how bad I was until I went back 10, 15, 20 years later, playing these games again. Yeah, so I would say teenage years, I was at the stage where I kind of didn't suck anymore. Well, I still suck. I'm 25 and I still suck, but sucked a lot less, that I can actually experience these games in their entirety. And I probably had just as much free time as I did during my childhood, so it was the best of both worlds. As you get older, though, you notice a lot of changes go on in your life. As we grow older and transition into adulthood, life throws more responsibilities at us. Careers, bills, relationships, and countless other commitments demand our time and attention. Suddenly, those long gaming sessions we used to relish become a rare luxury, if not an impossibility. The truth is, we have less time to play video games, and we become more discerning about how we spend that precious time. And as a result, we become a little bit more picky and choosy as to what we actually want to do with our time. And video games, we may have a certain number of hours every day that we can play video games, but how we play those video games is also a very important thing. For example, you notice a lot of older people talking about how video games are too big these days. I remember when I was younger, when I was like 18, 19 years old, seeing so many people online say that and just think that they're crazy. You're basically advocating for video games to still cost the same that they do, but also get less content in them. Like, you're actually it's something that you want, is for video games to be smaller and have less stuff in it. So I was just, like, completely blown away by so many people saying that. But as I started to age, I completely understood where they were coming from, because these video games, most of them, like, I try to get into these new games and they're just so overwhelming that I end up not really getting that far because it's just so much of a time commitment, not just to learn the game, but to beat the game. In a lot of these games that take like 50 plus hours to get through the story, which is just something that I can't do. Like, I started a Let's Play of Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories back in February, and I'm still not halfway through the game. So I end up like just saying fuck it and kind of putting it on the side and playing these smaller games that take a lot less time to finish. And I end up feeling a lot more fulfilled because I'm experiencing more games, more experiences, and just have more diversity of games to play rather than having to sink my time into one video game to try to beat that one game. And it's just too daunting for me. You know, like that's, I think that's also why I have so many games in my Steam library that I bought over the years and just never played. And for so long, I didn't really understand the psychology behind that. But it's pretty simple now that I think about it. The game is on sale. You see it's on sale. It's like, oh, this is a game that I've always been interested. So you buy it when it's like 70% off. And you're like, oh, this is a great deal. And I'm saving so much money. But then you end up never playing the game because you're just so... Your brain just gets so overworked at the idea of having to start a new game, having to learn the gameplay mechanics, and having to actually commit time to beating the game, that you don't want to do it. You default to the games that you already play, the comfort games, as you would call them. Games that you don't have to learn because you already know them. Games that you don't have to commit a lot of time to because you've already gotten most of the experience out of these games. There's no pressure, really. You can just hop in and have a good time, and that's that. And that's definitely the reason why most of the online games that I play is stuff that I played when I was younger and have played it for so many years, like Call of Duty and Battlefield, because I know those games like the back of my hand, and it's better than trying to get into something like Rainbow Six Siege or something like that that's just completely brand new, and just the hours that it takes to be not just become a master, but just to become competent at these games. I just don't want to do anymore. So it's not just single player games, it's online games as well that I'm noticing a change of behavior in myself and how I'm kind of just wanting to play it more safe because of the fact that my time is more limited. Another behavior change that I noticed as I got older, I am a lot less patient with games. If I die a lot, if I can't get through a level, I get very, very angry, which is something that I didn't really experience when I was younger. I would just be like, oh, okay, I have to replay the level, oh, that's fine. Now, I just, like, I shamelessly, on my Let's Play channel, use save states on the PS2 emulator, so I do not have to replay the level because I just refuse to spend the time, the extra time, to beat the level more time than I have to. I just won't do it. I also feel much less inclined to play a game on super, super hard difficulty, where it just kind of, I feel like it artificially extends your playtime because the enemies take more damage. In these shooting games, they're practically bullet sponges, and I hate it. I hate it so much. So, I mean, I'm not going to play like an easy mode, but let's say if it's like easy, medium, hard, super hard, I'm probably going to play hard. I also tend to avoid tedious tasks in video games that make you play the game a lot longer than you otherwise would, when I kind of just want to move on to the next game, and the extended playtime doesn't really add any value for me when it comes to like getting all the collectibles and getting achievements and all that stuff, which is something I never really was big on anyway, but now I'm just like, nope, I just want to get through the story and be done with it. Like, I kind of just rush myself through these games now. If it's like a big game, like a Bethesda game, where there's a bunch of side quests, I'm very much engaged in the story content. I want to get through all the side quests as well as the main quest, but I'm not going to play Fallout 4, for example, or Starfield on the highest difficulty settings, because first of all, I don't play these games for the combat, I play them for the story. So stuff that increases my time with combat, I'm really just not going to do, like I said, with the whole difficulty thing. And also, I am going to shamelessly get infinite ammo, infinite supplies, because like a big part of Starfield is like mining for materials and resources. I find that shit so boring, and I get zero enjoyment and satisfaction out of actually doing like these menial tasks in video games, that, yeah, if I can skip it, I'm going to. And I'm not going to be ashamed of that. Let's say I only have 3 hours in a given day to play video games. I don't want to spend most, if not all of those 3 hours trying to get through one part of one video game. Like, no, I'm not doing that. Sorry. And I don't even got a wife or anything like that. A family, kids. If that ever happens to me, I'm pretty much going to have to retire from video games, because it's just like, how? How would I be able to do that? I know there are a lot of people that are able to, or but it's like, it's not the same. It really isn't the same when you're at that point in your life than when you're younger and you just have nothing to really be responsible for, and nobody to take care of, nobody to feed, nobody to that depends on you, you know? So it's definitely a completely different dynamic, and I think that dynamic is really the underlying cause of why people just feel so different about video games. It's a lot different than a TV show or a movie where you just sit and watch and that's that. Video games are very, 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 very time consuming, more than any other entertainment medium out there. And that's why I see a lot more people saying that modern gaming is trash than people saying modern cinema is trash or modern television is trash. Although you will have a lot of people saying that, I just feel like with video games, that feeling is more emphasized because of the nature of what a video game is, something that demands a lot of time from you, time that you may not have. The existence of more online-oriented and live service games that basically require you to grind out missions over and over and over again in order to unlock whatever skin that you want or weapon or whatever it is. There's definitely a lot more grindy stuff in video games than there were back in the day, back 10, 15, 20 years ago, for sure. And that sucks when you don't really want to spend all that time on one video game. But when you're 15 years old, are you going to feel the same way about these live service games? Are you going to feel the same way about games that require so much of your time when time isn't really an issue for you? As the years go by, our gaming sessions get shorter and shorter and shorter. It's not that you love games any less, it's just that the life's responsibilities weigh so heavily on your shoulders, and as you get older, you tolerate a lot less bullshit because of how limited your time is. You know that the average age of gamers is steadily rising? It's not just kids and teenagers anymore. We so-called grown-ups still have a passion for gaming. The average age is like 35, 36, and it just keeps going up and up and up and up and up because, you know, the older people that didn't necessarily have video games when they were young, they're dying out. And the people who did, and like they grew up with the NES, they're in their 50s now. If you got the NES in 1985 as a 10-year-old kid, you're like 48 right now. And if you grew up with the Atari, especially like the Pong, like that was the very first video game in 1972, and you were 10 years old, well, you're like 61 now. Like, so it kind of makes sense why the average age of a gamer is getting older and older and older. So it's not necessarily that people are quitting video games, that people are done with it. It's just the way that people play them are so much different, and that just has to do with growing up, getting older. Life sucks and then you die. The older you get, the closer to death that you get, and you realize that time is a more valuable currency than even money is. And so as a result, we become more selective about how we spend that time. And with that, our expectations change. We become more selective about the games we invest our precious time in. Nostalgia often plays a role too. We fondly remember the games of our youth, the ones we played when life was simpler and responsibilities were few. Those memories set a high bar for new games to reach, and sometimes it feels like they just can't measure up. It's like I can think of so many different things that I was interested in when I was a kid. Whether we're talking about cartoons or music or anything else that we consume. For example, back in 2009, 2010, when I was 11, 12 years old, I was a big fan of pro wrestling. I still kind of am, but I always considered that time period to be like my favorite era in wrestling. But that's not necessarily because the wrestling was better back then. It certainly was not. Like, I look back and I'm like, there's no way that if I started watching 2009 wrestling as a 25-year-old, like if I was 25 in 2009, that I would have the same love and appreciation for wrestling that I did when I was 11 or 12. I just don't think I would, you know? So I think that's just, it just all materializes. Nostalgia is such a powerful thing that we kind of blind ourselves to it and don't realize that it just really is more, it really more signifies that we missed that time of our life rather than those individual things, those individual video games or those individual songs or whatever. What we really miss is being younger and not having to worry about as much shit as we do right now. You ask any person in any age group what their favorite era of video games is. If you're 50 years old watching this, you were born in 1973. That means you grew up with the Atari 2600 NES. And when you were a teenager, you got to experience the Super Nintendo in the 16-bit era. I am certain that most 50-year-olds who are gamers are going to say that one of those time periods are their favorite time in video games. Not the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and beyond. I know one person who is the same age as me who says that the 16-bit era was their favorite. And that's someone who happened to grow up on it because they had a Super Nintendo when they were like 3 years old for whatever reason. I don't know why or how. That console was past its prime years before this person was born. And I am talking about you, Magna Master, longtime viewer of this channel and a good friend. So he's in a special situation, but I can guarantee you the vast majority, 99.9%, of 25-year-olds are not going to say Super Nintendo is their favorite time period. But a lot of people in their late 30s to early to mid 50s are going to say that. You know, so I think a lot of it has to do with people being a product of their time. My father was someone who was so against video games. He never understood it, and he just always thought it was weird that I was so into video games. But he was born in 1963. In 1970, when he was a kid growing up, yeah, you had Pong, right? That was a thing. But it really wasn't like... gaming wasn't really at the point yet where it could be something that you can invest a lot of time and hours into, and it being like one of your favorite things that you can do. It just wasn't there yet. The NES didn't come out in North America until he was 22 years old. 3 years younger than I am now. And by then, he definitely felt like he was too old to get into stuff like that anymore, especially since video games were mostly marketed towards kids and younger people at that point, and not adults. The first time that video games were really marketed towards older people was like the PS1 in the mid-90s, and by that time he was in his 30s and he was almost going to be a father. So I always completely understood why my father was never much of a gamer or understood gamer culture. It's because he was a product of his time. If I was born in 1963, I don't think I'd be a gamer either. Even though some of them are out there, it's not as common, not nearly as common as people born in 1973 or 1983 being gamers. So I really believe that all of our opinions and tastes in video games, it's all time relative. Everything else is just background noise, whether we're talking about video games just changing and being different and yada, 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 yada. I don't think that really matters as much as us just going through life. It is simply not possible for someone who is 12 years old, goes to junior high school, and outside of passing test scores, doesn't really have anything that they're responsible for, versus somebody who has a 9-to-5, they have a wife, they have a kid, or maybe more than one kid that they have to attend to when they get home. It's just, you cannot enjoy anything at the same level during those two different stages of life. You simply cannot. And it's definitely not something that should be dwelled upon. You shouldn't be sad about this. It's just natural. Life, this is what it is. The alternative to getting older is to die at a very, very young age. So I'd rather go through this than not go through anything at all and just not exist, you know? So just keep that in mind when you get sad about how, you know, you just don't enjoy video games as much as you used to. It's just you know, the passion isn't there anymore. Well, such is life. I think it's a lot more constructive to find new passions that align more with your current lifestyle than something that requires a significant amount of time and not enough payoff. I'm gonna be transparent and honest with you guys. YouTube is the main reason why I play games, why I talk about games, and why my interest is even somewhat alive these days. Because the potential to make money, as little as it is right now, just the potential for me to make more money in the future, it feels more productive. Talking about video games, recording gameplay, and like playing the games, it feels more productive when there is some kind of financial incentive there. When you're an adult, money matters quite a bit, because money equals freedom from having to work a dreadful 9 to 5 life for 40 years of your life. By the time you actually get to enjoy it and have all the time in the world, you're too old to really get to enjoy it because of whatever problems that you have physically. You obviously can't move like you used to, and you're kind of you're close to the end of your life. Like, I know I don't want to do that, so I kind of use this as a way to build myself up financially. Everything I say is true and from the heart, but if I got demonetized tomorrow, I can't promise that I'm gonna put half as much effort or even continue to do this thing, honestly. Like I said, even though the money is small, the idea of it getting bigger one day, I mean, it's crazy. I made one video on my other channel, Mr. NoobTube Gamer, that took me about an hour and a half of my time to make. I made $500 in ad revenue off of that one video. So this YouTube shit is insane. And it's honestly like one of the things that's just like, it just keeps me going and going and going with this video game shit. Like, because I feel guilty when I'm just spending time playing video games, and I just feel so, like I said, unproductive, and I feel like I'm wasting my time. But when there's dollar signs there, you're never wasting your time. I'm nowhere near being able to do YouTube full time, but I would say that if the opportunity was to present itself one day, I would much rather play video games all day than work in a factory all day. Plus, I have so many other things going on, not just video games. Even though I have like 3 or 4 gaming channels, I have politics, I have personal vlogs, just talking about my life, sports, wrestling, MMA, so many different passions and interests that, you know, if I were to do YouTube on a more full-time level, well, I would have so many different things to do. So I feel like it would never get bored. But I'm definitely veering off the track a little bit. Not necessarily the topic of this video is what I want to do with YouTube. But I think, you know, it really just explains how your motivations and your goals and your interests change dramatically the older that you get. Video games is a prime example of that.